Hello and welcome back to another episode of Addicted to Business. Today, joined by my co-host Nathan Lomax, we are joined by the content marketing god, Rich Willner. Hello Richard, how are you today?
Yeah, good, thank you. Thank you very much for the introduction. That's stretching it a bit, I think.
Content marketing god, Rich. That's a big claim.
We like to give our guests some credit, Rich.
Yeah.
Rich, let's start from the very top. So I want to know how you found your love for content and how you started off in your career.
Well, how far back do you want to go? Well, all the way back, honestly, all the way back to first school. I can remember, so probably the age of 6 or 7, quite vividly, writing a story day after day after day when I was at my very first school with sort of only a handful of pupils. And I guess that probably ignited maybe my love of kind of writing stories, creating stories. And it's gone through my career ever since. You know, I can remember my brother and I writing imaginary football reports we kind of created just on a piece of A4 in the kind of shape of tabloid newspapers with headlines, and we would just create these football matches that ended in 7-7 draws, for example, and so we were able to wax lyrical about it. So yeah, always had that love. I went straight from sixth form, where I'd done it. I did English at GCSE and then at A level, into a career in journalism, and was there in journalism for nearly 20 years. And that was mainly around sport. That's my sort of real passion. So ended up being head of sport at the UK's largest regional morning newspaper, and then started getting a real passion for digital. Went across into a digital marketing agency, starting in a content role and then developing into a more strategic role. And so that love of content has never left me, really.
Great Rich, what a story. In terms of thought leadership, I'm going to dive straight in. I'm conscious that people listening will normally be used to 3 of us sitting in the same room and chatting around and having great fun. And obviously with COVID and everything that's going on, we're not able to do that. So I get everyone's kind of overwhelmed with the volume of webinars and podcasts and stuff in this kind of Zoom format. So really keen that we get as much kind of value out of this as possible. I want to touch upon thought leadership, the importance of thought leadership, and how any business can kind of get involved in generating thought leadership content.
Yeah, for me, thought leadership kind of, it displays knowledge. But it also displays a kind of human side, and I'll come on to that in a second. I think it's a combination almost now, almost a more modern day thought leadership, if you like. But really what you're doing is you're aiming to build a level of trust. So if somebody wants to use your business, use your service, they can see over time essentially that you know what you're talking about, but you're also that you're a good person to work with. And this is what I mean when I think a sort of combination of the two, really. Thought leadership, perhaps historically, maybe meant more to kind of the knowledge side of things. So you are just showcasing your knowledge, and that's how you can do thought leadership. But I think much more now we are seeing this is what I know, but also this is who I am. This is these are my values. This is what I believe in. And I think the two now combined, I think can be, sort of super powerful for people. So I don't think you can have one without the other, clearly. But I think the two combined make for something really quite powerful these days. Just on that point, Nathan, about anybody could be, or any brand could potentially be thought leadership. I don't think it's necessarily right for everybody. Okay. So, for example, if you are a budget retailer and your proposition is really price point, you just want to be the cheapest, then do you really want to come out and then, try and work on being a thought leader within your space, or do really you just want somebody to find you and buy from you?
Sure.
So I don't think it's necessarily right for everybody. I think it works in certain industries as well. I think in the service to service, the B2B industry, particularly, I think it does work well, and I think it is important. But I think in some B2C spaces, it probably isn't. It doesn't quite have that level of importance, I would say.
So if you're talking about brands, Rich, if you're a brand, or a business wanting to get started, how would you advise that? How do you get started in thought leadership if you are a brand?
Yeah, I think an obvious good starting point is knowing what you do. And you might chuckle, but I think there are some startups in particular who probably don't necessarily know exactly what they're offering, what their product or service is, and it might kind of just become clearer over time, maybe. So I think if you don't have that, then obviously it's going to be very difficult to talk authoritatively about what you do and what you offer. But I think just as important from my perspective, and it's also going back to this kind of combination of knowing what you do and why you're doing it and how you're doing it, is about your own values. Why are you doing what you're doing? I think that's really important to get across. I think we're seeing, I think more and more people are buying from brands that they feel that are kind of aligned with their own values. And again, as sort of going back to my previous point, if you're buying a £5 item online, you probably don't care too much about that, frankly. But if you're buying sort of the bigger ticket items, if you like, or you're looking to work with somebody on a regular and consistent basis, it's important that you like that person and, you feel some sort of empathy, or you feel that, you have common values. So I think that, they're both really important points to start.
Rich, in terms of brand propositions, certainly during COVID-19, we've found that a lot of propositions are no longer relevant based on what's going on out there in the world. One thing I'd be keen to understand for those listening is how you really go through the process of creating a brand proposition, and then how you go through a process of taking what you've got and adapting it. Is there like a framework or a system you would use so brands can go, actually, am I still relevant?
I think probably it goes back to the previous point a lot. I think it's still really important to be really clear on why you're doing something, and what you are bringing to the market that is slightly different. Historically, again, we will have heard the phrase, you all will have heard of USPs. But in this day and age, it's so hard to be genuinely unique, right? It's very rare that you will find a business that does something that nobody else in the world does, So I think, and that could entail asking yourself some actually quite difficult questions, as a business, or as a team of directors, asking perhaps some quite challenging and some quite difficult questions, but with the objective to really drill down into that sort of common goal, that common purpose. I have worked with companies who tell me, right, well, this is what we're about. This is our proposition. And, it's really clear. And so then you actually ask them the question, right, okay, so you go into a pitch situation, for example. You're one of 5 companies looking to get that business. And then you get kind of a bit of a muddled response often. And even one person will say one thing and another person says, well, no, hang on, it's that. And as soon as you've got that, it's right, guys, you are not clear. You are not clear on your proposition. If you can't even agree in that situation, then how am I as a potential client, potential customer, how am I going to know what you stand for? How am I going to know who you are and why I should buy from you? And if it comes down to that, and let's say go back to that pitch situation, there's 5 companies and they're all doing the same thing, then I'll just go, all right, well, I'll buy on price because I don't know, and, and it's so frustrating as well. It's such a shame, because probably all it takes is perhaps for somebody, and it could well be an external person. And I know, you guys have talked about kind of having non-execs, on board, for example, who could be perfect in this kind of situation, who are able just to say, right, I don't quite get it at the moment, and I sense perhaps some slight disagreement. Right. So can I ask you a few questions to then tease it out? And I think that's so important for a team of directors as well. I know we're going slightly off topic here, but it's really important for a team of directors as well, because at least then that you have a sort of shared goal and a common purpose, and you're all doing it. You're all doing it for a good reason. And then when you go out individually and speak to at events, or speak to individuals, or speak to contacts, and you're all speaking to different people, at least you are saying something similar. You're having a similar message. Again, I've been part of teams where people just haven't agreed, and if a company comes and asks one person something, they'll get one answer, and if they go and ask the second person, they'll get a completely different answer. And again, so what am I to do as a customer, or a potential client in that?
I mean, the interesting thing for me around proposition is it's not only external but also internal. So not only reflecting your values and what you do and how you do it and why you do it to those potentially going to engage with you, you're also looking at recruitment and saying, well, okay, why come and work for us? Certainly when we leave COVID, there's going to be a massive importance on being able to stand out and being able to be different. Employment is probably changed forever. So it's really important that you do stand out and you do offer those kind of perks or opportunities that many employers previously may not have offered, such as flexible working, etc.
Yeah, and I think I think it's a really good point, Nathan. Is you're absolutely right, and again, it goes back to just being really honest about kind of why you're doing something. Again, I have sat. I remember sitting in a brand values kind of workshop, and there was a sort of senior team sitting around the table, and when they started to talk, and it was like, and I was trying to tease out kind of, so what do you want to say? What do you want your values to be? Their responses were, I knew that those responses were, this is what we think we should be. It's not what we are. And I would much rather in that instance, if you're a company and frankly, you may well be just after a quick buck and you want to sell, you want to make a sale straight away. Well, be honest. Don't try and hide it behind some sort of brand values, which is, yes, we want to get to really know our clients, and we want to put them first and all of that, when it's nonsense. Just, yeah, there's nothing wrong with that. The thing is, there's nothing wrong with that. If you go, I don't know if you go, I'm sure you guys are familiar with sort of Simon Sinek. I'm never quite sure how to pronounce it, but his whole philosophy about kind of starting with why, and finding your why. And I think there's a hell of a lot to be said for that. But I don't think it's necessarily 100% true that everybody has got this why, especially when they're starting out in business. Some people, they just want to sell, or just make that quick buck. Well, that's fine. Absolutely fine. But like I say, just be honest about it. At least then, like you said, Nathan, internally, staff coming in, they'll know what to expect. In sort of environment, they're not expecting perhaps something slightly a more flexible working hours, or perhaps a slightly more touchy-feely kind of relationship, perhaps with sort of senior management. It's just, you're here to do a job. This is the expectation. Now get it done. Well, okay. Is there a problem in that?
Thing is around consistency of that message and making sure, like you say, that everyone's aligned and pulling in the same direction, and then making sure all of your materials reflect the same message. The amount of businesses we see that they might have gone through this exercise and the website might say one thing, the brochure that was printed 3 years ago says something else, and the team is saying something else, and you get this kind of disjointed approach, and nobody really knows, and that's almost more harm than good.
Yeah, absolutely. And then you've got the staff who probably are confused. They're thinking, right, well, hang on. Yeah, I've got one person saying this, our external documents are saying this. Then when they go out, because we're all, sort of advocates of the businesses that we work in, when they go out and talk to their friends and their social circle, they're probably saying, well, I'm quite confused, and a message spreads. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. External and internal message, and obviously the other benefit of having that consistency across both is that then if people internally feel as though there is this consistency, they know what the company's about, it fits with their own values, well, they're going to stay longer, and they're gonna put in that extra effort. They're going to work on a Saturday when it's needed, you know. Um, rather than right, it's 5 o'clock, here we go, I'm off, which again I've seen that in companies, so
So you start off with the clear message. You start with your reason why and getting your proposition correct. Correct me if I'm wrong, but assuming after that, to build out your content, as a business, you then need to implement some sort of structure.
yeah.
What are your tips for doing that?
So I think call it a content strategy. If you want. It seems a bit of a grand term, I think. Maybe
Rick, you love it. That is,
I do.
That is a U-turn.
Content is king.
Yeah. But I think it's really important to have some kind of overarching document that anybody can dip into and get a really good understanding of what you're about and what you're aiming to achieve. So within that strategy document, I think it's really clear on having some objectives, so that may well be 3 or 4 objectives. Don't make them too ridiculous, like we want to sell an extra 100,000 units off the back of this. What is the point of what you're doing? So I think that's really important. I think then a bit of an overview, obviously a sort of direction of travel, if you like. Understanding your target audience is obviously so important. If you don't know who you're writing for,
pointless, isn't it?
Well, what you'll probably end up, and this is what I see, a lot of companies probably fall into this trap, is they end up writing for themselves.
Yeah.
Because they haven't defined that target audience, or they don't understand that target audience. They don't understand their needs, and then it just becomes internal, and it almost just becomes sort of powder puff PR pieces, which obviously nobody's going to want to engage with, frankly. So obviously target audience is really important, and that may well be refined over time. To begin with, it's probably going to be quite difficult to say, right, well, we want to target this particular person in this particular industry who works these particular hours, who is this particular demographic, who shows this particular behavior. So it might be quite broad to begin with, and then perhaps start sort of refining that down as you develop your content and your marketing in general, and then you also build up sort of more data from your sales activity. It's really important, I think, when you're starting out in content, is to talk to your sales team, because they're going to know who they're speaking to, who are their prospects, and so the two should work. You should dovetail nicely. So I think be really clear on your target audience. That will help you hopefully as well define the kind of level of content that you're talking about. Now, by that I mean, are you talking about your more strategic level of content? If you're looking to target a business owner, for example, you're going to want to create something and create yourself as a thought leader within that space. And the stuff that you write will be very different to if you are looking to target maybe a line manager within a company, for example. They're going to have different needs. They're going to want different things. So being really clear on that is going to then help your the type of content that you start producing. So you could say, like, really, it doesn't necessarily tie in perfectly, but if you're looking to perhaps provide more strategic content, you might be thinking the whys, so why you should do something, or why you should try out this platform, or what it can do for you, looking at those ultimate goals. Whereas perhaps a line manager might be more interested in the how to, because they're looking at implementation maybe. So it's, how do I tag up Google Analytics correctly on my website, for example. So I think that's really important. I think one of the other areas for me that is really important is, don't let a good idea go to waste.
Okay.
A lot of companies will have great ideas when it comes to content, and they'll do one piece and then, right, it's on to the next one.
Yeah.
But that fantastic idea, you can dissect and turn into so many different formats, and potentially, repurpose it, and even perhaps adjust it slightly so it fits with different audiences as well. So don't go throwing away, a piece of content.
Rich,
also, sorry,
carry on if you've got more. Love it.
Yeah, one of the other big things I think is to create it's called a content calendar, editorial calendar. You call it whatever you want, but don't make it overwhelming. I think with all of this as well, I think this is really important for this top level document, is don't turn it into 20, 30, 40 pages long. Don't think, my God, this is a really serious piece of work, so it's got to be really serious when it comes to the number of pages. I'd say, if you can turn that into a 2-pager, 2, 3, something like 2, 3, 4 pages, it stands more chance of getting read, frankly, as well, by other people who come in.
Yeah.
But so the same with the editorial calendar. Just have what the content is, who's going to write it, and a deadline. Then you can start to develop it from there as to, right, so this one idea, how are we going to then turn that into a video, into an infographic, into social posts? But I think that's really, again, I think getting a deadline within a calendar is pretty crucial, really, because how many times have I heard, and I'm sure you guys have probably heard this as well, is I started writing a piece of content, or I've thought about a piece of content, or I'd love to write it, I just don't get the time. Well, actually, if you can create a calendar, and let's say you want to do, right, we'll do an article every month. Suddenly, if you've got a spreadsheet and you've got, wow, I've got a year here to produce 12 articles, suddenly it might not seem so onerous, Yeah. It's like, this is actually achievable. I can manage this. And I need to have it done by the end of the 3rd week of every month. Great. So I've set myself a challenge now, and I've set myself that deadline. So, I can do this. So I think that is really important as well. Get a calendar in place.
So Rich, one thing I'm particularly keen to discuss is different content for different levels. And by that, I mean, sometimes you've got content and strategic. We touched a bit about it, about strategic content for like C-level execs. But actually, one thing we're particularly keen to do here is generate some content from the team as well. I mean, how have you found that working with other businesses and agencies? Do you think there'll be more of that going forward? That actually it's not just the exec show, there's actually a whole team behind them that have got some fantastic insight and kind of content to share. And I guess the thing is, how can a business listening today start on that journey of getting the team to write as well as just themselves?
Yeah, no, I think that's a really important point, and a good point, Nathan, again. If particularly in that sort of service to service B2B space where somebody isn't just going to buy on a website, they're going to there'll be quite a sort of stepped process, if you like. And part of that will be doing research on your company. It's going to happen. They're going to visit your website, and there's a high chance that they're going to engage in that content you're producing. So if it's only coming from one person, let's say it's a team of 20, if it's only from one person, you know, that might lead to that company or that individual who's doing that research thinking, well, that's great if I work with Nathan, and if Nathan is going to do all of the work for me, because look, I can see he does all of this content. He also does his day job, if you like. But what about the other 19, you know, and what's their knowledge like? And you know, you wouldn't get that but let's say half of them or all of them, you get to the point where all 20 people are putting out content. Wow, that's pretty powerful, isn't it? You know, that's quite a powerful message you're sending out. You know, I'm doing it, yeah, as, you know, maybe the founder or the director, but also I've got this fantastic team, and they've all got their particular specialism. You know, they've all each got their area that they talk about and they're real experts in. You know, my God, who wouldn't want to buy that, or who wouldn't want to speak to that company? You know, so yeah, I think it is important, and yeah, like you're saying, it's going back to that understanding at which level each individual person of the team needs to kind of talk to. You know, who is their target audience? So you might have a target audience as a company, but you're gonna, you know, you might have your directors who are going to want to speak to the business owners or fellow directors, and then you may well have, as I said, you know, perhaps your team who are dealing with more the tactical pieces and just helping somebody through a problem. You know, because there may well be, and even on a daily basis or a regular basis, be interacting with that campaign manager or that line manager.
So just quickly on tone of voice, how do you make sure that you're not quashing? There's a split, right, between personality and around brand tone of voice. And it's like, you don't want to quash someone's personality and not allow them to write in their general style. But at the same time, some style might not be appropriate for the brand. And if it's going out under them, then essentially it's reflecting the brand as well. How do you kind of juggle that?
I think a big thing comes back to that sort of what you're about and what your values are again. You know, so for example, if you are a brand that you're comfortable, for example, you want to be seen as obviously as a leader within your space, and your values are about openness and honesty. So that's external, that's internal. That may well lead to, say, you've got one person who actually quite likes to use a lot of coarse language in an article, for example. Well, that's fine, because you've got a value that perhaps, you know, sits comfortably with that. But if you're a funeral directors, you know, you might not want to be pumping out content from somebody who does use perhaps language that isn't appropriate. Yes, each individual will have their own style, and will have perhaps a slightly different tone, but it all kind of needs to be sitting under this kind of overarching, I think, you know, tone of the company, of the brand. Because again, you know what the old saying goes about sort of first impressions. You can never make you can never make a first impression again. You know, so if somebody does get perhaps a poor impression from somebody who is writing under your brand, if you like, obviously that's something you might want to avoid if it doesn't fit in with your ethos.
Yeah, of course. So talking about different industries there, I mean, from your experience, how has different content worked for different industries? How have you found different content works for different industries?
Yeah, I think just from a sort of personal level, I find the B2B space often it's almost slightly easier to become that kind of thought leader within the B2B arena, I think. You know, because you are talking directly or dealing direct with somebody who has a very special need.
Yeah.
You know, as a consumer, clearly, you know, it might not be a need necessarily. It's just, you know, something that you might want to buy for yourself or for the kids or for the house or whatever. Yeah. So I think the B2B space, I think, And I think we regularly see that. I think people who work in the B2B space tend to see thought leadership or content as being more of a need, perhaps, than in the B2C space. Whereas in the B2C space, when you talk about content and content strategy, that may well be around getting your product pages as amazing as they possibly can, as opposed to becoming a thought leader. You look at Amazon, well, they don't do a huge amount of thought leadership articles. They don't need to, so I think B2B definitely works. That's not saying that it can't work in B2C. Clearly, if you're somebody who sells drones, for example, you can still be a thought leader around, somebody looking to buy a drone. So, I think it's content and thought leadership often can be quite sort of industry specific, I think. And going back to that very first point, Nathan, on yours, it's not for everybody. I don't think it needs to be for everybody. This isn't a one size fits all kind of gig, if you like.
That's a great shout, Rich. And I think I'm really conscious that not only of time, but also of the fact that I really want to make sure that someone listening today, perhaps they're not in a position after COVID to hire a content marketing specialist such as yourself, Rich. And if they could, I'd absolutely encourage them to do so. But thinking about what they could do if they're going to go on their own content journey to start with, like they might work with someone like yourself later down the line, but from today they're going to start writing content. What are the kind of pitfalls to watch out for that you see happen time and time again? You think, oh, just don't over like every other person does.
Yeah, I think the biggest one probably I see is don't look inward. If all you're going to do is talk about your coffee mornings or the fact that Jim has celebrated 25 years service, or we had the store cupboard painted the other day, then frankly, nobody's going to care about that. Let's be honest. So you need to think about that target audience, and again, just right for one person. If you are, like you're saying, you're taking baby steps, and I can totally understand that. You might have one client or one customer that you love to bits. Well, right for them. Have that person in mind and think, well, what are the kind of questions that they might have asked me, or the issues they've had, or the challenges they've faced that I've been able to help them overcome, and then I can just, I'll jot it down. And so I think looking too much internally is is one of the big pitfalls. And the other one, I'm sure I read somewhere that there is more content written every day now than in the entire 19th century or something. It was something like that. I might have made that up, but it was something along those lines. Yeah, who cares?
Sounded good.
Any content, isn't it? We don't have to be factual here, do we? So there is a ton of content being produced every single day. Every single minute of every single day. So if you're vague, if you're bland, if you're not saying anything new, then I am going to switch off straight away. If you don't have an opinion, or if you can't show me or tell me a different approach, or maybe how to do something in a slightly different way, then you're not going to get any. And companies are surprised. It's like, well, we've written 20 blog posts, but we've had nobody read it. Well, yeah, but we'll take a look and think, well, why? Perhaps even just get somebody from outside of the company, a friend, somebody you trust, to say, do you know what? It's really boring.
To have an opinion, right, and hang your colours on the mast and say, this is what I stand for, and this is what I believe. Don't just sit on the fence.
Absolutely. Nobody wants to read a load of fake nonsense. I'm not an advocate of this. I'm not a fan of this at all. But, the Daily Mail, they write for a particular audience in a particular way. I'm not saying I like it. I don't like it, frankly. You know, I don't like a lot of how they go about things and what they end up producing. But hey, it's not bland. It's not vague. They're not sitting on the fence.
Just if you're listening, Daily Mail, he doesn't mean any harm by that, and he is actually quite a good bloke. Just to cover yourself there, Rich. But yeah, I know this podcast is going global, mate. So if anyone can,
that's true.
Apologies, Daily Mail.
Daily Mail.
So Stokely, conscious of time, and Rich, I just wanted to say thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
It's always lovely to catch up, and always so much information and insight, and always looking to pay it forward. So thank you, Stokely. Any other questions from your side?
Not from me. I maybe have one actually. Looking into the future of content, where do you think it will lead us in 2 to 3 to 5 years? You know, what's the role that it's going to play for businesses?
I think probably the majority of savvy businesses, you know, the really switched on ones, over the next 2 to 5 years will be using me a lot more. I think, you know, because I think that's the way they're going to get. That's the way they're going to get on. You know.
I love that.
We can cut this thing. Sensational.
No, I think going back to that very first point again, where we started, I think this combination of, right, this is what we know, this is what I know, you know, building that knowledge, but also combining it with, and these are my values. So you can trust a business that you know that they're going to do the job, they're going to get the job done for you. You know, you can see that from their expertise and the knowledge that they share and the way they talk about it, but also that I'll be able to work with them and I know they're decent people, or they're complete arseholes if that's who I want to work with. You know, so I think a combination of the two. And, you know, there'll probably be a new format along the line somewhere, you know. You know, who knows? Will it be voice? You know, suddenly we'll all be creating content for Alexa and Google Assist and whatever else is coming around the corner. Yes,
it's super interesting, isn't it, to see that everyday changes and changes every month.
Well, you know, sort of, you know, you say kind of Alexa can play Addicted to Business, you know, and suddenly you get kind of 45 minutes
of Richard Willner.
Well, exactly. It's going to be a repeat. And you know, and they're just going to go, I get enough of this. Or what is probably more likely is they'll use that as a cure for insomnia. So I might stick him on
and get to bed. Rich, one thing that's been really lovely from the time that I've known you certainly is the way that we can all have serious conversations, we can all offer value, but actually you never lose personality. And sometimes when you're listening to these things, they can be a bit dry, they can be a bit dull, but there's been a couple of belly laughs in there. So thank you so much for giving up some time. It's been lovely to catch up. Yeah, who knows, maybe in 2, 3, 5 years we might have an internet connection that doesn't keep lagging, but until then, really good to catch up, mate. Look after yourself.
And you. Cheers, guys. Thanks a lot.
The content marketing god, everybody. Thanks.
See you later. Bye.
Bye-bye.